We've got a whole team of carers that we're getting a laser treatment.
Government is renowned for moving slowly, but when it comes to reviewing our federal environment laws, it seems records could well be broken.
This is an historic day for the environment.
The Albanese government's Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, today announced a new Environment Protection Authority to run what will eventually be a very different set of laws to the ones that have operated for the past 25 years. The new body was part of an overhaul recommended by former ACCC Chair Graham Samuel almost 5 years ago.
We saw very little reform attempts by the Morrison government through the process from 2021, early 2021, until the election on May the 21st, 22. And that was disappointing.
Albanese Labor promised before the last election that it would act on the Samuel review, which recommended reforms in 3 stages. The biggest task, rewriting the Act itself, is still ahead, and there are some criticisms that the government is moving too slowly. But Samuel today endorsed the government's approach.
The final stage of the reforms is really a redraft of the EPBC Act itself. Now, we've got 1,500 pages of legislation and regulation which are gobbledygook in the current law. They need to be torn up and started again with a new law, including national environmental standards.
The government made some initial changes late last year, which included increasing oversight of the impact of developments over water resources. But today, Tanya Plibersek announced what will perhaps be more conspicuous changes: the establishment of a Federal Environment Protection Authority and an environmental equivalent of the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which is hoped will both improve the database on the environment but also become a resource to help business with development approvals.
At the moment, the Minister makes every decision when it comes to environmental approvals. The Environment Protection Agency will be set up as an independent statutory authority. That means there'll be less political pressure on the EPA when it's making decisions.
On the contentious battleground of environment versus development, there is always resistance to change. Graham Samuel says his report was shelved by the Morrison government after entrenched opposition, particularly from Western Australia.
We had a bit of a standout. The West Australian Chamber of Mines said publicly that if the recommendations of the report were adopted, there'd be no new mining projects in Western Australia. I thought that was utter nonsense, frankly, and said so publicly.
In recent weeks, Western Australia and its industries have been making themselves heard again. WA Premier Roger Cook has raised concerns about what he says would be a disproportionate impact on his state.
The sum of what's being proposed is of concern to industry. There have been some, commitments around improving approvals times and the like, making parts of the process easier. Unfortunately, in terms of what we've seen so far, there's no real evidence to suggest that that will in fact be achieved. There doesn't appear to be an effective response to the duplication across state and federal environmental approval regimes. There are deep concerns that a federal EPA is planned to eventually be able to make its own decisions without considering social and economic benefits.
This package gives stronger protections for nature, but it also gives faster, clearer decisions for business. For a start, we're putting more resources into environmental assessments just to speed them up. We know that some businesses find it very difficult to negotiate the environmental approvals system. So by providing more information, more feedback on the early stages of an environmental approval, we can give that guidance that businesses need to make much faster assessments.
Conservationists also have reservations.
An EPA is good, and we've been arguing for one for years, and we're welcoming of that. But the EPA will be implementing a broken act. So until those reforms of that act are put in place, we expect to still see extinction happening in this country. We are seeing our reef bleach. We are seeing koalas that are threatened with extinction. So time really matters.
The government will introduce its draft legislation in coming weeks, but says it remains open to consultations. Graham Samuel says the changes so far offer benefits to both business and conservationists.
We worked on a process to ensure that we didn't have duplication between the Commonwealth and the states. And if that happens, then business ought to be applauding loud and clear over the processes that will be formed over the next few months. The other element of it for conservationists is that we actually get an effective law, not the abysmal failure that we've had for 2.5 decades. We'll get a law that actually protects the environment and protects nature.
A key difference between the current system and the proposed one is that the minister currently, as decision maker, is essentially given a yes or no option to respond to a particular development approval. Once the new standards are in place, it will be up to applicants to make sure their proposal meets the standards. The question is whether the government will be able to implement these key reforms, the new standards, before the next election.
Well, they'll be introduced when they're ready.
In the meantime, the second tranche of changes looks like facing a rocky parliamentary road.
The processes need to be condensed, not expanded out. And this essentially, as it's been explained to me, this nature positive bill will be the death of mining. And no wonder people in WA are absolutely aghast at what Tanya Plibersek's proposing.
What the Minister has announced today is a piecemeal of what is required and what is needed. And in fact, it might make things worse.
The debate over the proposed new laws will play out tomorrow in a Senate inquiry being chaired by Senator Hanson-Young.